Okay, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Ignite 2015, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to come to our Yammer Roadmap session. My name is Juliette Wei. I'm a product marketing manager for Yammer. I have with me Gadi Benzvi, who's the director of product. So direct all the hard questions to him, for sure. We're based in San Francisco. We're thrilled to be here to talk about the future of Yammer and what that means for collaboration. Before we get started, I want to take a quick informal poll here. How many of you today use Yammer at work? Okay, good. I think I'm preaching to the choir. Well, our goal is that by the end of the session, pretty much every hand will be up. So keep me honest. Let's take the poll again at the end of this to see if what we say convinces you to use Yammer at work. So what we'll do is we'll spend the next hour or so covering 3 different sections. I'll take about 15-20 minutes talking about the future of collaboration and how we see Yammer playing a very important role in that. Then Gadi will come in and talk about our new product strategy and the key roadmap investments we're currently working on now. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with additional resources and ways to engage and ways to get started with Yammer. Couple of housekeeping items before we go. This is a level 200 session, so that means while we're going to be covering our roadmap and our features and what we're working on, we're not going to get really down and dirty into the technical details. So there's other deeper dive sessions during the week, which we'll point you to for that if you want to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, but this is not the one. Also, since we have a fair amount of content, we will ask you to hold your questions to the end, and of course, we'll stay longer afterwards if there's a lot of burning questions in the room. And finally, if you're not already on the Microsoft Ignite network, definitely join and ask us questions with the hashtag BRK2103. Okay. So before I get started onto the exciting things we're doing in Yammer, I actually want to pause and raise a pretty serious issue that's come to our attention. I want to be sensitive because I know that this has been very controversial. It's been written up about in CNN, New York Times, Washington Post said it's an issue that has divided the planet and actually torn personal relationships apart. So I am talking about, of course, the dress. How many of you here know about the dress? Awesome. Yeah. I think that deserves a couple of t-shirts.
Wait, let's see if they get the right color.
All right. Who here thinks this dress is white and gold? That's what I see too. Well, you're wrong. The dress is actually, who knows the answer to this? Awesome.
I heard it from over here. Oh, sorry.
So this is the dress that went viral overnight and had people all over Twitter and Facebook, BuzzFeed, Reddit, Tumblr, arguing and even self-identifying into camps, Team Blue and Black, Team White and Gold. And by the end of the week, there were over 10 million tweets and 37 million hits on the BuzzFeed article. It's pretty impressive. Now, I bring up this dress as an example of the power of social networks. Human networks have always existed. Think about the hunters that banded together and hunted that giant mammoth for dinner. But what technology has done has made it possible for us to connect with strangers, share information, and work towards a common goal at lightning speed and on an unprecedented scale from before. And what this has done is it's not only changed the way we reach out and connect in our personal lives, but it's also changed what we've come to expect as customers. Companies used to control the dialogue with carefully planned PR and marketing campaigns designed to dole out just information they wanted us to know about their products. And in that way, they used to control the conversation. But now we as consumers freely share our unfiltered experiences, good and bad. We learn from each other, and we collectively share public perceptions. And not only do we expect to be heard, we expect companies to respond. And if they're not responding fast enough, we take change into our own hands. Now, on the way here, I learned about the most recent example of this from American Airways magazines. This is where I get all my breaking news and inspiration for my talks. But they actually had an article about how patients are using social networking to turn the medical establishment on its head. So traditionally, the way medical research works is the big guns, healthcare institutions and companies come up with areas that they want to study. They spend months and months designing research protocols and recruiting the right patient population. And then they go out and conduct these long studies. But for people with rare, life-threatening diseases, they don't have that amount of time. They need change, and they need it really, really fast. So what they've done is they've banded together on a social networking site called Patients Like Me, where they can kind of join in, identify themselves, share their medical data, share their medical treatment information, crowdsource funding for new research, and even offer themselves up as study subjects. That's really, really powerful. So social networking isn't just about discussing the color of dresses. It's really about transforming how companies and industries relate to us. Now, that's life outside of work. It's really easy to connect with strangers and band together and work towards something we have in common. But at work, the opposite is pretty much true. And that's because we're still confined to traditional hierarchies, working with limited information that's given to us on a need-to-know basis. And this worked really well when information traveled slowly from point A to point B to point C. Competitive advantage was all about how quickly you can jump in, seize that data, hold it to yourself, and use it to get ahead of competitors. But in a world where we're facing the opposite problem, we're actually being flooded with information, not facing a scarcity of information. Competitive advantage is all about how quickly you can learn and adapt and respond to data. So what companies need to do to enable this new way of working is move from their command and control structures to informal networks where people can gather and freely exchange information. Now, the makers of that dress that we talked about was able to capitalize on the information that exists on social networks. They didn't control that dialogue. They didn't even plan for that, that dress to go viral. But what they found is that people actually liked a white and gold dress. They were demanding it. They were standing up for it. And so within a month, the company came out with a white and gold version of that dress and cashed in. The flood of information we're facing at work also changes how we interact with each other. Whereas work used to be a solitary pursuit, I would sit at my desk and do my one task and do it really well without having to sort of bother a bunch of people. Now it's a communal effort. That's because before I used to have pretty much all the information I needed to do my task really well. And that information was expected to stay fixed and have value for some amount of time. But now information is everywhere. No one person has all the information they need to do the job they need to do in the best way possible. No one has full visibility. And so the way we cope with that is we share and we collaborate and we create value together. And again, what that means for companies is they need to stop taking a laser-like focus on individual productivity, getting me to do the same thing faster and more frequently, to actually enabling collective value creation so that we can come to better outcomes and make better decisions and have better visibility. What this means is teams are becoming more central to work than ever. And the teams of today look nothing like the teams of the past. They're not fixed and siloed and bounded within an org chart. They're dynamic and networked, crossing geographies, disciplines, even company boundaries. It's really not uncommon today to see companies partnering with customers, influencers, and even competitors to achieve more together than they would have on their own. And these teams are far from fixed. They assemble when there's a specific deliverable or objective in mind, and then they disperse quickly once that's done and move on to the next thing. An interesting stat just came across to me a few weeks ago, and that's 40% of our workforce in the US will soon be comprised of contingent and freelance workers. That means, by definition, our teams will be dynamic and formed of people outside of traditional hierarchies. So, in summary, the shift that companies are facing is pretty extraordinary. And in order to be responsive in an information-rich world, they need a whole new way of working, a collaborative way, a way that's dynamic and open and experimental and responsive and not rigid in the way that they used to be. The concept of dynamic teams may sound kind of futuristic, but I can assure you this is how a large cohort of our people work today. And by 2020, millennials will be more than just a cohort. They will be the majority of our workplace. What characterizes millennials is the fact that they've grown up on social networking. To them, information isn't something to be kept to themselves and hoarded. It's actually something that's of value to the world, and they'll share it freely across social platforms, whether it's an interesting joke, a funny news story, something that happened to them that day. They view information as something that benefits the public. And what that means at work is what they'll do is they'll take an early spark of an idea and put it out there and let people crowdsource iterations of it until collectively they come up with a better product than they could have alone. Millennials also are comfortable experimenting with new ways of communicating and working together. Think about photo sharing on Instagram, fleeting messages on Snapchat, and group chats on WhatsApp. These are all the different ways that millennials work, and they're not tied to one modality. They mix and match according to what they need to get done at hand. So they're really fluid, and they're very flexible in the way they work together. And finally, this is the original mobile generation. They're always on, they're always connected to the cloud, which means they expect their conversations and data to follow them no matter what device they're on. So, to us, millennials are really a perfect example of what modern collaboration should look like and what we're seeking to provide with Office 365. We're giving teams a choice of collaboration tools to work together across geographies, devices, and apps. If people want to message in a more private way, or in a more limited way, they can definitely use email. If they want to message in a more open way, they can use Yammer. If they want to have real time, they can use Skype. If they want to meet, they can use Skype. There's so many different ways to communicate and connect and share information. And at the same time, we're providing a connected experience across all our apps. We don't want to create more data silos. We want to use a common intelligence fabric to be able to easily share information and have teams discover what others are doing and build upon the work of others, even if they're switching across projects or devices or tools. So if you haven't had a chance to attend our sessions on Office Graph, which is our machine learning engine, or Office 365 groups, definitely encourage you to watch the recordings of those sessions. So I think that'll really round out your view of what we're trying to do with Office 365. As a core part of Office 365, Yammer is the tool of choice for teams seeking to work in that new way I described. And that's because Yammer brings a network model into companies themselves, opening up the lines of information and communication and making it really easy to share and discover. And what we're doing is we're focusing on 3 of the biggest issues that we think dynamic teams face. The first is the ability to connect easily across all the geographic, device, environmental, and app barriers that we face as we try to extend collaboration beyond our small silo teams. And we're doing this by giving teams a home, using Yammer as a place, a common ground for teams to gather. And what we want to do is make it super easy for these teams to create a group, invite who they need in, have relevant conversations, collaborate on documents, and move their decisions forward, all within the bounds of a place that they know really, really well. The other thing we're doing is we're enabling users to work smarter and faster with Yammer. The average information worker spends 20% of their time, or 1 day a week, simply searching for the information they need. Lack of visibility is the biggest barrier to effective collaboration, because if you don't have the context around the team's thinking, how it's evolved, how decisions were made, why this document came to be the version it is now, it's really, really hard to get up to speed and add value quickly. So what Yammer wants to do is optimize for the open flow of information. We're creating groups that are public by default. We're using posting as a conversation model so everyone could be participating in the same conversation. We're surfacing relevant content across the network to you and your groups. And we're making all of this possible so that teammates who are on the road or in the field can be just as productive as they would be in the office. And finally, this is one that's near and dear to me. We want to make it possible for you to scale your impact. I don't know if anybody in here focuses on one project at a time or works with just one set team. I think our lives have gotten a lot more complex than that, and we're juggling multiple V teams and initiatives and projects and things that we're reviewing. And what this means is while there's a lot of opportunity to make an impact, there's also a ton of context switching. Every time I have to flip over to my inbox to look for a message or search through folders and drives to look for a file or go to different sites to look at the progress of various teams, it requires a mental tax on me that basically decreases my ability to focus and be productive. And so what Yammer is doing is we want to be that one place where you can look across all the groups you belong to, see the status of your projects all at once, triage across your most important conversations and tasks from this one place, share an interesting article that somebody from one team passed over to you with other teams that they might be relevant to. And then when you move on to the next thing, you're no longer part of this project or team, leave behind a body of knowledge for others to leverage and build upon. And that's what we mean by impact. So we're really excited about this one here. Now we've put together a video to illustrate how teams use Yammer today. Great. We've got lots of real-life examples of customers that actually use Yammer like that. We've got Nationwide, which uses Yammer groups to bring their customer service teams together. If you imagine being on a phone call with a customer service rep that really wants to help you resolve an issue, but doesn't have the answer, now what they can do is they can go to a Yammer group and crowdsource answers to complex issues and reach higher and faster resolution rates. We've also got UNICEF UK, which uses Yammer to scale the impact of field workers. And what they do is they basically use Yammer to share what they're seeing in their missions to reduce infant mortality rates, for example, or prevent the spread of HIV. And what this does is it informs the home staff who's involved in fundraising efforts to go out and inspire donors and use more targeted efforts to raise money. So some pretty good use cases for Yammer and teams. And this week, actually, we've got a couple of customer panels. Cargill, Kroger, Ernst & Young, Gannett, the Hershey Company. They're all here and willing to talk about their experiences with Yammer. They'll talk about how they've achieved success bringing Yammer into their organizations. And hopefully you guys will be able to attend. There's a session tomorrow morning, BRK 2101 if you want to, and hopefully get inspired by their stories. So I'm going to pass it off to Gadi now to talk about our product direction and roadmap investments and how we're making this vision come real.
Thanks, Julia.
So
Juliet walks us through. No. I can go. Oh, that was like magic. That video actually reminded me, we're here at a conference, it's really topical. I wonder if we actually organize it through Yammer, I'm not sure. So Juliet walked us through the way that we view the world a little bit and the change that's happening in it. And then we talked a little bit about the Office 365 approach and what Yammer's part is in that. I want to dive in a little bit deeper on what Yammer's approach is, what we're building right now to meet those needs, and share a little bit about just how we think about the product. But to start off, I think it's really important for us to start off with Yammer's mission. Now, this mission, to make companies more open and responsive, and to make people more connected and engaged, this has been our mission pretty much since day one in Yammer. We're really trying to make you and your companies be able to adapt and lead in this new world that we're seeing everywhere. Now, when you look back into Yammer's history and the way we actually started thinking about this, we saw the same change in the world that we were talking about. We saw that there's a huge shift in the way that people communicate in their personal lives. We saw the rise of social networks, and we saw that it changed the expectations that we had from each other, of responsiveness, of getting answers, of just communication overall. And the insight from that, we thought, what if we just do that in the enterprise? It seems like no one's doing this. This is a huge need that we have. Communication in the enterprise is stuck in many times in the 70s. So let's start from there. And that was the first Yammer we built. And that's why people talked about Twitter for the enterprise, Facebook for the enterprise, because it was that. It was talking about one person and the entire network. Now, it's been a while since Yammer's been out, and we've learned a lot. We've gone to our most successful customers, and we saw the way that they were using Yammer. And we saw that it wasn't actually that one person in the network. The admins in those networks were pushing people to groups. They were pushing them to smaller contexts, to places that were more relevant to them, that would make it easier for them to start communicating with the rest of their company. So we saw how central group was for them. Then we went off and we talked to our users, and we got a lot of feedback from them. And one of the things users kept telling us was they have this huge fear of posting. And when you think about it, it makes total sense. There's hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people in these companies, and it's really daunting to post something, to open yourself up to the entire company. Now, also, if you're new to social networking and your context is email, you might think of it as basically sending an email to your entire company, which in most companies would be considered spam. That would be taboo. It would be a terrible thing to do. Now, you take that into account with also Dunbar's number. Dunbar's number says that there's a cognitive limit on how many social connections we can maintain at any time. And Dunbar put it at about 150. So what that means is if you have thousands of people in your company and you're going to post to them, you're essentially posting something to a bunch of strangers, and it's really scary. But let's say you get past that fear, and you say, no, I'm not scared, I'm going to do it, I'm going to post. Now there's a problem with context. Thousands, tens of thousands of people, what do I say? So your two options are either say something really, really smart, and that's really hard, and there's a lot of people here that work with me, they'll tell you I don't often say things that are really smart. But your second option is to say something that's super generic. And then, again, that makes you think, should I even say this? It has to be appropriate for all this audience. Maybe it's better just to not post. So that's a huge problem. Now, at the same time as we were looking at our user base, we were still looking at what's happening in the industry and in the consumer space. And what we saw was that all these new social networks were coming up. And they had a different approach. They said, let's reduce the context. Let's reduce the scope of sharing. And as a result of that, they got a very different pattern of engagement throughout their networks. So we saw all of those happening, and we thought, we need to evolve Yammer. We need to move Yammer from this idea of broad network sharing, where it's one person and an entire network, and really focus in on teams, on enabling teams to collaborate openly. Now, when we think here about teams, as Juliet was saying before, this isn't just about your org chart. This isn't just about your immediate team that's in maybe an Active Directory. This is about every single project team that you have. And we're all working on multiple things at the same time. And it could be people from inside your company. It could be people from outside your company. This is also interest groups. So in Yammer, for example, we have interest groups on different kinds of technology. Even if you're not actively working in that technology, but you're interested in, you want to grow in that direction, we want to be open to that. We want people to pick up things, new skills all the time. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to mimic the way that people work. People don't work by saying things to the biggest reach that they can by talking to the entire company. People work by finding relevant teams for them, relevant groups, and going quickly back and forth with them. So we increase the relevance, we increase the frequency of communication, and we're going to reduce the scope of communication. Now, this might sound a little bit like a pivot of the product. It really isn't. Like I said before, our most successful customers were doing this. They were already pushing their users to use groups in this way, to use Yammer in this way. What we're really doing is we're solidifying in the product all the things that we were already seeing in the wild happening. We're making groups more central so that when a new user comes in, you don't have to go through a ton of user education to explain to them this is the way you use Yammer. The product is just going to push you to use Yammer in that way. So Juliet walked through these three areas. And when we think about what investment we need to make to get people to think of Yammer as their place for teamwork, we really do think about these three areas. So I'll walk through them a little bit. In bringing your team together, what we really want to focus on is making sure that you can have the right people in each conversation. So the first thing that comes to mind there is not everyone's using Yammer. It might be that just a small subset of your company has adopted it so far, maybe half of your company, but certain people are still stuck in email. So we want to make it easier for you to pull them into a conversation and not have to already be members of Yammer Network. If they're a member of your company, that's good enough, and you can start getting engagement from them on Yammer. The second thing that Juliet was talking about was this rise of a dynamic team. So as you think about that team that's now dynamic and it spans a community that could be outside your company, we want to make sure that you can bring those people into the conversation. Now then we think about working smarter and faster. And this goes again back to people's personal lives. There's a different expectation that people have. People expect products to work. They expect them to work well. The tolerance for bad products is lower than ever. And we can see that. We can see a few trends that have happened in the last few years. There was bring your own device to work. There's bring your own product to work. Basically, if the product doesn't work well, people will not adopt it, and they will pick some other tool. And we don't want that to happen. We want to combine the ease of a product that's in consumer with the compliance that you would expect from a product in the enterprise. And then lastly, we think about scaling that impact across teams. This is something that Yammer started off from, the idea that there's an entire network there. It's not just about one team. So as we're building Yammer and we're really focusing in on groups, we want to make sure that we're not losing what made Yammer special. That serendipitous discovery, that you would come in and you would see a conversation that you had no idea was happening. And you can jump in and you can participate, and you're seeing these, some companies called it Yammer wins across your entire company. So as we're building towards that, we don't want to lose any of the benefits of current Yammer. So I'm going to dive into all of these, but first, I want to talk just a little bit about our development methodology. In Yammer, we test everything. Everything. Now, we want to make sure that when we release a feature, that feature is good for the users, it's good for the network, and it's creating overall value for your company. We never release a feature just to say that we have that feature. We release it because it's better. It's better for you. It's better for your company. We really think about it in this cycle. We build, we measure, and we learn. So we have an area that we want to tackle. There's a problem in the world. And we have a lot of assumptions on how to tackle that problem. We take those assumptions and we turn them into hypotheses. Then we figure out how are we going to measure those hypotheses. We design an experiment around that. We run the experiment, and then we learn something. And that's the build, measure, learn cycle. Now, you might ask yourself, why am I talking about how we develop? Well, it's actually really important because I'm going to show you some features, and I'm going to show you some specifics. Most of the things that you see are things that have, maybe some of them have recently gone out. Most of them are still being developed or being tested. I would be shocked if the things that I'm showing you today are actually the things you're going to see in the end in your networks. The reason is we're not always right. No one's always right. That would be shocking. So we're going to show you some stuff, but that's not exactly what you're actually going to see in your networks. So focus on the problem areas. Focus on the way we're going to solve them, and the particulars are probably going to change a little bit. Now, I could truly talk about Yammer development methodology for a very long time, an hour easily, but that's not what you came here for. I do think, though, that is Yammer's secret sauce. That is the reason we were successful. And if you do want to learn more about that, I'm actually giving a session on that with our director of engineering on Thursday morning. So if you want to learn more about that and what was Yammer's secret sauce and made us special, come to that session. So now I'm going to dive into those areas, and we're going to start with bringing those people together. So just to give you a little bit of a time frame for all the changes you're about to see, again, these are things that are either just been released or released to some small subset of users and being rolled out to a broader context, or these are things that we are actively developing right now, we're testing, and you should see in the coming months. So in this area of bringing your team together, we really think about 3 investments. The first investment is integration with Office 365. Now, in that integration, we want to start off with identity. We're trying to make the identity story tighter between us and Office 365. We want to offer better centralized control so that, for example, something we're releasing soon, if you suspend a user in Active Directory, they would also get suspended on Yammer, and you don't have to manage this control of users across 2 different places. Apparently, I hit a nerve. And then when we have that connection, that's actually going to enable us to bring in the Office information, the graph information, and feed that graph again with relevant information from the Yammer network, making your overall Office 365 experience better. So here, the first thing that you're going to see, and this is out for some of the networks, so you might have seen this already, it's Office 365 sign-in. So I'm going to walk through this a little bit with some screenshots, because sign-ins aren't terribly exciting. So here we're on the Yammer login screen, and in this case, I'm Molly. So as Molly, I'm writing in my email address, and I'm about to sign in. I tab away from this field to the password, and you see the spinner telling you that there's some redirects happening and trying to find an SSO. At this point, it would see that there's a connection. Molly already exists as a user in Office 365. It's going to match the identity, and instead of taking you to the normal page, the Yammer sign-up, it'll go to the Office 365 sign-up page. So then you can use the same password as Office 365 to log straight into Yammer. You'll be taken to Yammer. Also, as part of this, Yammer is going to appear in the suite nav. So you have that Hive button in the top left. If you tap on that, you'll see Yammer is one of the options. In this case, we'll go over to Mail. Here I'm in my Mail. And then, again, you tap on it. Yammer is there. So you can move freely between these different products, and you don't have to enter your password. Aside from how important this is, I think, for admins, that you just have to manage an identity one place, this is really important for users. People don't remember their password. A shockingly high % of users, when their session ends in Yammer, they actually try to reset the password because they don't remember what it was. So we really want to avoid that and make it as seamless as possible for users and the best control we can for admins. Now, aside from that, the next area we're talking about, 3 areas, is enabling users to easily bring in people to conversations. And here, we're going to talk about something that is truly huge, external messaging. This has been the single biggest pain point for users in Yammer. This is the biggest reason we hear from users why they don't adopt Yammer, or why they tried Yammer and they left to something else. And it makes sense. We looked at Exchange data, and we saw that 46% of outgoing emails that you have in your company include someone external. So if you think of that one in every other communication is something that this tool, that Yammer doesn't support, that's a really good reason to leave this tool, and for many users, not come back. Now, this trend is actually only going to grow over time. Intuit had a study that by 2020, 40% of the workforce is going to be freelance workers. That's over 60 million people. So when you think about that trend that you're going to have to talk to people outside of your company is only going to grow over time. Now, we're going to do a demo of external messaging. This is a feature that's going to be out in about 2 weeks to everyone. So we have a real treat here. We have actually the TPM and the PM that built external messaging here. Lindsay flew in from London for this. So for this and a session tomorrow. So they're going to demo how external works, or external messaging works.
Yeah. Hey guys, my name is Jay Sethna. I'm joined here with Lindsay. You can call her Vanna White for right now. She's going to demo it. I'm going to talk through what Flexternal is. External messaging, actually. So one of the great things that Gadi talked about was this ability now to connect other teams. Being able to, depending on how dynamic your projects are, if you're working with a customer, a partner, a vendor, being able to give them all the context when your teams are working in Yammer today. So here I am. I'm Jay. I'm logged in. My company is called Contoso. So here I am working in one of my groups inside the Contoso Yammer network. And I really want to work with this girl named Devin. Devin's a close friend. She actually works for Microsoft. And I want to know when the next company event is. So right within Yammer, I'm going to type out and ask when the company event is. And right below that, there's actually a bar that says, like, add people to notify. All I have to do now is simply add Devin's email address directly to it. And right when I do that, 3 things happen. First, there's a yellow asterisk right next to her name, and then right below that is defined, a yellow bar comes out that says you're about to add an external participant to the conversation. So you can hover over that, and it'll show you who you're about to invite to the conversation. And then the third thing, it's really subtle, but there's a post button. And now with the post button is a global icon. That icon is actually consistent across all of Office 365. So if, let's say that you're in SharePoint, if you see that icon, it also designates that somebody outside of your network can view that file. But in this sense, even before I hit post, I know that my action is going to be seen by Devin. So I'll hit post, and voila, she's added to the conversation. So that globe icon then permanently is pinned to the top right corner. And that's so anybody that is scrolling through a feed knows that that conversation is unique. It's different. It has special rights because somebody outside of the network can view that conversation. The other thing that happens is there's a system-generated message. So this way, anybody, again, can see Jay added Devin to this conversation. So I'm actually now going to flip over to kind of show you what Devin's experience would be like. So one of the things that I really love about this feature is the flexibility it gives. Sometimes people have never signed up for Yammer, or they do use Yammer, but they're working in their email inbox at that time. So we're going to show you that you have the flexibility to either invite somebody that just uses email or Yammer, and they can contribute to that conversation. So here, I'm in Devin's email inbox, so at the Microsoft, and right there she sees a post. In the yellow bar highlighted at the top, it says that this message is happening outside of the network that you're in. Same, you see the conversation that Jay added her to. You also see the globe icon to the top right. So you see all that information. And what you can do is simply just hit reply. And right there, Devin can type in her message and hit post, and it'll actually pin right to the conversation just as a thread. But let's say that Devin is using Yammer. So one of the things that's really important is you never actually enter somebody else's Yammer network. These always remain completely separate. We're just giving you the permission to see it in your own Yammer network, so it surfaces there. So it's not going to show up in Devin's feed or anything like that, but rather she goes to her inbox, and right there at the top, she sees Jay's added her to a conversation. She sees some of the UI changes, like right next to Jay's name is, in parentheses, the domain he's part of. There's a globe icon, and Devin can just simply hit right there, type in the date of what the event is going to be, hit post, and awesome. Right there, it's right. So we're going to now switch over to Jay's view. Jay can just hit refresh, and Devin's comment is pinned right there. Again, Jay's in his Contoso Yammer network. Devin's in her Office Yammer network. And the other thing, too, about why this feature is so great, in my opinion, is it allows you to take the conversation however you want that information and then take it in a totally different direction. So now that Jay knows that here's the day of the event, let's say that he wants to do something more with the information, but he doesn't want Devin to see it anymore. All Jay has to do is actually hit that button that says Remove Participant. And right there, there's going to be a message that says, Jay, remove Devin from the conversation. And what it does for Devin is it actually pulls that message from her Yammer network. So she no longer has access to it. And now Jay can do anything with that conversation. He can add people from his own network, add somebody else from another Yammer network, and Devin no longer has access to it. So we're really, really excited about this feature, and we can't wait to ship it. We've already had some successes with some of our beta customers, and we really want to hear more about how you guys are successful with this feature.
Oh, that was great. So that was great. That's really exciting. And as you see there in the features, we really thought about this, about the end user here, and we thought that we need to err on the side of transparency and accountability. So it was really clear when Jay added Devin that he was adding her to the conversation, and then it was clear where she left the conversation. So for that portion of the conversation, Devin was exposed to everything. So aside from making it really clear for the user with transparency and accountability, we also know that we need to add, this is a shift for Yammer, this is something new, so we also added a lot of admin controls around this. I'm not going to talk about those because those are pretty nuanced and they probably just deserve a lot of time to talk about specifically. If you're interested in those, come find us afterwards, any of us here, or come to the Yammer booth and we can talk about them in detail. So aside from external messaging as a way to bring in people to the team, We're also doing something on mobile where we're making it easier for people to take people from their contact list that are in their company and invite them to a conversation in Yammer, even if they're not Yammer users yet. This is something that we've had on the web for 6 months maybe, but we didn't have this capability yet on mobile. So you'd have to actually go to a desktop computer if you wanted to add someone that happens not to be in the Yammer network. That's a lot of cognitive overhead for you. You need to really understand who's right now in the Yammer network and who's not, and why can't I find Joe from accounting. So we made that part really easy, also on mobile. Now, the third area in bringing your team together that's really important. Oh, so I didn't know if the internet's going to work, so I just have some screenshots of it. But it did work. So the third area is compliance. Compliance, we think it's something really important. Yammer is just a newer product in Office. We're a younger product, and we haven't gotten to the same level of compliance as the rest of Office 365, or most of the rest of Office 365. So we're really working hard to get to HIPAA compliance and to EU model clauses. We have multiple projects running right now that are trying to take dependencies off of third-party services, that those services don't meet the compliance requirements that we have. So in the coming months, you should see us reach HIPAA compliance and EU model clauses. And that takes us to this second, let's call it pillar of Teamworks. So working smarter and faster. And here there are two areas we're focusing on. The first area is groups. So we talked a lot about teams and kind of mentioned groups interspersally as it. So for those of you not familiar with Yammer, groups is the way that we think about teams. Groups is the organizing factor of Yammer. It's a self-organizing factor, so anyone in your network can create a group, can add all the relevant people to it, and can start a conversation. They can add resources to it. They can bring in people that are relevant to the conversation. Even if it's a private group, they can still bring in people for specific conversations if they need them. So this is a really powerful structure that we already have in Yammer. Now, the way that I personally use groups is I have a group for my team. And in that group, we only talk about things that are really relevant to the team. But also, we want to talk about product things. So for product, we have a bigger group that's more public, that more people can see exactly what's happening in that group and see the product debates that we're having and talk to us about how we think about product internally. Then for every project I have, I created its own group. So for example, today, Juliet and I are giving this presentation. We started off by creating a Yammer group. Into that Yammer group, we posted all the previous roadmap talks that we had, all the relevant resources. Whenever we needed something, we pulled in relevant people. So we pulled in Lindsay and Jay, and we pulled in designers if we needed something from design to get the most up-to-date mocks or to make sure we have the right environment. And it was also an open group. So anyone that was just interested in seeing what is Yammer going to talk about from across Microsoft could just go into that group and see it. So people wanted to review our work to see what's happening. It was just there. It was public. Just go and do it whenever you want to. So basically what we're saying with this group focus is we want to make Yammer a group destination. We want to make it a starting point for your day working in teams. The first thing we're doing there is on mobile. So you'll see here two things on this screen. There's, first of all, a group destination. For those of you familiar with our Android app, you'll notice that this looks a lot more like you're now in the engineering group. It really feels like there's a destination. There's something there with the colors. It's clear who the members are of that group. As you scroll down, it'll maintain that color, so you know that you're right now in the engineering team. So I think that's nice. The bigger thing here is the prioritization of content. So let's say you want to adopt Yammer as a place for your groups. There's a real problem now. The most important content that you have from across the Yammer network, the things that you were mentioned on, or the conversations that you started and people replied to, they show up in your inbox. They also show up in groups, but they're kind of in a random order. They depend on when exactly the conversation happened, how many conversations have happened since, so you might miss in a group the most important content. So what we've done here is for every group, we're taking the most important pieces of content, the priority messages, the things you were again mentioned on or directly replied to, and we're bubbling them to the top. So if I want to start my day in engineering and I want to make sure that I'm getting to the most important things in the engineering context, for me, it'll be there. It'll be that top one message or two messages that I need to get to. Now, aside from that, you'll see underneath that there's in red. We're also making it much easier for you to stay on top of your groups and make sure that you see all the content that's relevant. Right now, there's a big chance that you could miss something because the way we load groups, you click into a group and the counter's gone. So sometimes there's a piece of content that maybe was a scroll away, maybe it was 3 messages down, and you missed it. And that's not great if you're really trying to make this a place for your team, if you're trying to make sure that you have a workflow around it, that you're seeing everything and nothing's slipping by. So aside from doing this, and I'll go in more into the unread pieces later. So aside from doing this on mobile, we're also doing this on the web. Here you see existing Yammer. Actually, in my notes, I call this old Yammer already. We have a different experiment on in our Yammer network. So as you see here, this is the view of a group. And it's pretty standard to what you're used to. I just want to put this as a point of contrast as I'm showing you some of the new designs. So we're moving to, a little hard to see. So we're moving to this new design of Yammer. So the first thing I think you'll probably see is it's much cleaner design. It feels much more modern. It's really focused in on just a few things. And the important things are conversations. So you see on the right the conversation pane. We've actually made it wider, and we made the font bigger, so it's easier for you to read everything, and it really puts content in the center of it. And then the second focus that we're putting here is groups. So I'm going to go back a second here. Sorry, I'll be back there for those of you taking pictures. So when you see here this navigation that we have in Yammer, there's a top nav that has the search, it has compose, it has invite, it has some of your badges, so you know that there's something in notification, there's something in inbox. But then on the left, you have another navigation, and that one's groups, but it's also you that's up there. So it's kind of confusing where exactly you should go and what you should do. So we really focused this in here on just a few things. We moved all the navigation to the left. We've made it more modern and more wide, so now this is anchored always to the left of your screen. On the top of it, you have search, you have inbox, you have notifications. Those are the things that you can easily jump to the main areas of Yammer. What we're seeing here is the landing experience. So this is our discovery feed, as we call it. But below in the left nav, you can see that there's a few different groups there. We've given groups a little bit more space, so it's easy now to see the name of the group. There's also, on that third group, you'll notice that there's a person there. There's a little icon of a person, and there's a count. That means that somebody right now just posted something. So Yammer becomes much more real time. And you can see a conversation is happening right now and unfolding in that group. And if that group matters to me, I'm probably going to go in there and check it out and see if I can participate in real time in that conversation. On the right, again, this is the discovery feed. We've made groups a little bit more central there as well. You see that with the arrows, we've pulled out groups on top of messages. So it's really easy to see what group a conversation is happening in. And then you can join it if you think that this is the right context, this is the type of conversation you want to see in Yammer. Below, inside the feed, we put suggested groups. So now you can see this is a group that might be interesting to me and why it's interesting. You see that there's a reason there. Somebody I know is a member of that group, or this seems to fit in line with other content that you've read on Yammer. This is something that we just also finished testing on mobile, and it was a very successful experiment, pushing people towards groups, suggesting them algorithmically. I'll get to all that. I promise. So this was a user that already exists in Yammer, is already in a few groups. What happens to new users? So for a new user coming in, you obviously don't have any groups on your left. And what we did was the same thing that we saw in our most successful networks happening. Admins are telling you, when you come in, find the right groups for you. Find the right context, find the right people, find the right conversations. But the product was never pushing you in that direction. So you were kind of going against the grain. Now we're telling you, this is the place for groups. Find the right groups for you. Don't create a group. Don't do anything else. Don't look at content. Find the right groups for you, and then the content will be better. And then we're going to show you a group page. So this is a group page. That was the example that we saw of current Yammer. We've made a few changes here as well. You see here on the top that the top part of it goes full bleed, so it goes all the way to the end. So it feels more like you're inside a place. This is the product team. As you scroll down, that's going to maintain on the top. So you're not going to lose your place in the middle of a group. I know many times I scroll, and suddenly I'm not sure which group I'm in, and I have to go and check and scroll up. So it's kind of an annoying experience going back and forth. And then at the bottom, because we're really trying to focus you in on that group and being able to move from the group that matters to you to the next group that matters, we're putting this call out that, in this case, you see that there's one message from today. The next one is from yesterday. So that one I've already seen, likely. We're going to push you to this other group that might have interesting content for you. You'll notice in your left, that's not the next group. It's the next group with things that you haven't seen. So you're jumping from the first to the third group, and really being able to, through groups, consume all the content that you really care about in Yammer. Now, the next area of focus, Oh, wait. So still on group focus, there's a Delve integration, and this one is actually a starting point of a lot of different integrations. Yammer is now throughout Office 365 the place to have conversations about files, about documents. So the first example that we have of that is Delve. Now, in Delve, you heard a lot about that. Juliet's going to show a demo. In Delve, Juliet went in, and she sees a lot of content that's relevant to her. Actually, Juliet, do you want to walk through this?
Yeah.
Get things off.
Yeah, so as you may have heard, we are starting to feed Yammer signals into Delve, and one of the first things we're seeing is when you're in your Delve, well, first off, you look at the nav bar. It's really easy to navigate from Yammer to Delve if you pin it, and it's also in the waffle as well. But once I'm in Delve, this is where I go to discover new content from across Office 365. You may have seen this in other sessions as well. And I know that we talked about in a keynote about how Yammer's feeding some social signals in. But on each content card, there is a Yammer icon. And so what I can do is when I click on it, it actually opens up a Yammer conversation pane. And while files and documents are interesting in themselves, the real value is the discussion that takes place around it. Again, people thinking how they collaborated, how they got there, what they think is most impactful from that document. So this, I think, is an article about how technology can enable better collaboration. And actually, half my team sits in Redmond, half my team sits in San Francisco. So I know that we're really interested in finding new ways to work together. So what I'll do is mention my boss, Brian, because I think he should definitely take a look at this article. But what I'll also do is add the group that my team works in, just so they can add their perspective as well. And then I can hit post. Oh, I think that's taking me to the article itself. But let's see if that, yes. So actually, when I hit post, what happens is inside Yammer, everybody in the group that I mentioned can see this piece of article as well as the conversation around it. Brian himself can see it, and it's going to be a priority message since I've mentioned him. And what's great is if you go back to Delve, this conversation persists. So people who have access to the marketing group can actually see this conversation has taken place around this content. And so if there's other teams or other people that are interested in, say, forming a V team or initiative around bringing in new technologies to collaborate better, they can actually see who's talked about it before and then actually ping us and then bring us onto that project. Don't know why it's not showing up here, but I promise you it does work. Might be the internet, but we did see it in Yammer, so when you go back, you should see it in the conversation pane. Okay.
That was great. So the one thing you can't see here, because this is a demo environment, is actually on top of that Yammer spittle that you have for every single piece of content, you'll have a number if there's conversations happening in Yammer on this. So then you can just see conversations that are happening from across the entire network, everything that's visible to you directly from Delve. And then without losing your context, you can post things directly into a Yammer group. We're doing the same thing also with the Office 365 new video portal. So in the same way, you'll be able to share things from there directly into Yammer. Now, one caveat is this does depend on that identity work that we talked about before. So your tenant needs to be hooked up to your Yammer network. Right now, that's a manual process. An Office 365 admin has to go in and make sure that those two are connected. Some networks have done it. So if you have that access or you're close to your O365 admin, I would encourage you to do that. You're going to get a lot of new features out of it. But we're also working on turning that on by default and making sure that we have the broader impact with this feature. So, again, slides in case no internet. So next up is the mobile focus that we have. There's a lot of things that we've done here to make your work on mobile faster and better. I'm just going to focus through one flow really quickly. So we've changed the way notifications work in Yammer. That's weird. OK. So now when you get a notification in Yammer, you'll be able to, first of all, the notifications are going to be by conversation. So this is going to be on iOS and on Android. So you'll see a specific conversation. It won't roll it up in any way. And this is to allow you to easily triage. So easily decide from all these messages what you want to deal with. Then when you want to deal with it, you can swipe, you can like the message directly if that's all you want to do, acknowledge that you've seen it. If you want to take more action, you can click in on it, you can tap in on it, and it'll launch the Yammer conversation. Now let's say I launch that Yammer conversation, and I start typing something, and I want to get a Gartner report, let's say. So I start writing Juliet's name, and you'll notice I wrote in 3 characters. And so the way you used to do this, if you wanted to mention someone, there was a button that said @. You would tap that, it would open up a screen, then you would have to tap on top, search for someone, start typing it in, find them, click confirm twice, and come back. But now we're making it seamless. So as you're typing in people's names, it'll autocomplete on them, and you'll have this menu come up and you see that Juliet is the top person for me. And the reason she's at the top there is because we've been working together on something. She is the most relevant person for me from Yammer according to our algorithm. Now, an interesting thing here about the algorithm is we talked about delve and other signals from the graph. We're actually using those signals here inside this autocomplete. So if I actually never spoke to Juliet on Yammer, but we're both co-authoring a document, and we see that there's a connection there, she would still be the top person for me in Yammer. So it's really connecting your graph across Office 365. And then next, we have here an example of a new mobile publisher. So last week, I was walking around San Francisco, and I stumbled upon this viewing party for Golden State. They won that game, so it was really fun. But when I was there, I noticed how much fun, the image is a little small, but I noticed how much fun it looks, and I thought we should do this in the office. And particularly, I really like that banner that's there on top. And you see in the top left, it says viewing party. So we have a new option there where you can actually just quickly mark it up with your finger. You click a markup. I put an arrow there. It was attached more easily than it is today to a Yammer post on mobile. So you can see the attachments on the bottom. You can easily manage your attachments, and they're not hidden away anymore. So now you can easily add photos whenever they're relevant. So that's on mobile. I'm going to talk a little bit more about mobile in the next section. This is the last one. Scaling your impact across teams. So here we're talking about the things that are not specific to the one team, but they go more across your entire network. It's about your teams, your one team and your other team and your third team, and also serendipitous discovery across your network. So here we've really reimagined on mobile what our app looks like. So actually, I'll show it in a second. So it's a redesign, but really reimagination. If you're using the Yammer mobile app today, you know that it's a little disjointed. So we land you into this place, it's a discovery. And there you can easily see things across your entire network. Then there's a badge count, and that badge count tells you should go to your inbox, because all your priority messages that we talked about before, they're actually there. But also, if you get a notification, like we said before, that also takes you into your inbox. So we have these two dueling places of where you're supposed to go when you start off with Yammer. And then at the same time, we're talking about groups. If you want to get to groups on mobile, it's 3 clicks in, so it's really hard to get to. So we thought, what if we take all those things and put them together and make it easier on the users? So we started off by saying, let's take that priority content and let's put it all together right where you land on Yammer. So you can see here that I have a priority message in engineering. And then the next thing you're noticing probably is that there's 3 priority messages in Team UX. So we changed something around here. Instead of prioritizing all these messages by the timestamp, we're prioritizing them by their context. Their context, in this case, is the group. Now, the idea here is, as you're going through your priority messages, we want you to maintain your content. We want to reduce as much as possible the context shifting that you have to do. And there's actually Exchange research that validates this. They checked this out, and they saw that when they organized the inbox by the type of content, by the context of the message, people got through their inboxes faster, and they were more productive. So that's part of the reason we're doing this here. Now, aside from taking all your priority messages and making sure that you can deal with them here, we've also kind of heightened the priority of groups. So you can see below engineering, there's this call-out that says there's 4 conversations that are unseen in that group. So now I'm not going to miss those conversations that are really important to me in Yammer engineering. I know that there's 1 priority, but there's 4 other conversations. And this means that people don't have to mention you every time they want to make sure that you see it. You're going to see it because you care about that group. So I'm going to show you now a video of how this works. It's just basically scrolling through. What you're going to see is dealing with that first message and then just scrolling down the feed. So let's see that. That was it. It was that easy. And then scrolling down, you see we're going group by group. I guess it was so good we're going to see it twice. So take care of that message. We're scrolling down. We see a group there that actually doesn't have any priority messages, but it has unread things for you. We also want to highlight those things. And then we're ending up with this discovery section. So as you're scrolling down and you're done with all the things that are priority for you, we're going to show you discovery of things across your network. Now, on discovery, we've done a few things. We've just made the algorithm better, which is nice, but maybe not that interesting to talk about. We've also made sure that when you see things elsewhere, you're not going to see them in discovery. So if you go to your group and you see a piece of content and then you go back to that top conversations, that discovery feed, and you see the same content, that's super annoying. So we've made sure that that's never going to happen anymore. And then, or that's rolling out soon. And then lastly, we're organizing it by group because if you have important content, things that are really relevant to you, you probably don't want to just read that content. You want to read more things like this in the future. So we're going to make it easy for you to discover groups through discovery. So overall, we talked about these 3 areas. We're bringing your team together so you have the right people in each conversation. We're going to make it easier. We're going to make working in Yammer faster and better, which means that you won't have to go focus on groups, and also you don't have to actually what was the second point? So you don't have to go to your computer, your desktop computer, launch that to do all the work. You can do it on mobile. And then the third thing is you want to scale your impact across different teams. So you can see things in all of your teams, but also you can see relevant content from across your network. So you're getting both the best worlds, teams and discovery. Now, I'll just talk very briefly about a few things that are further out. These are things that we are actively thinking about. They're going to be not in the time span of the next few months, but I think they were worth mentioning. We talked about external conversations. We're also working on external groups to make sure that you can add people to, if there's a context that continuously needs someone from outside your company, you'll be able to add them there. You don't have to do it on every single message. We're working on Office 365 group membership sync. And that means that if you have a group in Delve or in Mail or in Active Directory, you can use that group also in Yammer. And you don't have to have 2 different product teams, for example, for me. One that's in Active Directory in Delve and the other one that's in Yammer. We're also, with all this focus on teams, we want to make it easier for users to actually start using Yammer in this way. So we're going to focus a lot of energy on onboarding people in this new direction of Yammer, of teams, and that working openly in teams. And then lastly, we're working with the Exchange team. So in Exchange Client, you'll actually have a really easy way to share directly into Yammer. So as you're using the client, and it'll be soon out, or a little further out, as you're using the client, you'll just have a way to say something directly into Yammer. So we'll go to questions in 2 minutes, but I know our time is short, and I want to make sure that you get your questions answered. So if you don't get your question answered, I really want to encourage you, come find me afterwards, come find us. We really do want to talk. And if you have questions, and if it's not questions, I would also just love to hear how you're using Yammer and how we can make it better. Wait 1 second, so Gila, just talk about this.
Do you mind coming to the mic? Actually, why don't we take questions now? These are, we basically wanted to cover off on some other related issues.
Are you going to?
Some other related panels and resources for you.
Thanks, everyone.
Are you going to talk about SharePoint and integration? I thought that was a big thing for Yammer.
SharePoint integration.
So there's a lot of things on SharePoint. There's a video portal, which that was like Delve we're talking about. So if you see a video, you can share it directly into Yammer. So you'll have that pane of kind of a Yammer embed that you can go back and forth. There's also the OneDrive, which is kind of under SharePoint. So we're going to integrate longer term that our files would be the files in OneDrive. So we're working on them, but it's more foundational work. The stuff that we really want to unlock first is identity, and make sure you have the same identity and group identity. And I'm happy to talk about it more afterwards.
Yes?
2 questions. One is integrated search across Office 365. Is that anywhere on the roadmap? And 2 is Windows 10 Universal App.
Sorry, what's the second question?
Like a Windows 10 Universal App?
Oh, got it.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention this, but as part of scaling your impact, we are actually working on our search. We're trying to make it better. We're trying to make it faster and go across networks. The search with fast powering it, that's a little bit further out. We are also actively exploring the Windows 10 Universal App option. We don't have anything, though, to say about that yet, or a timeline.
Are you looking for Skype for Business integration? It doesn't seem to make sense to have two separate chat engines. Are you doing anything with Skype for Business?
Yeah. I think Skype is really focused right now on merging, as we heard in the keynote, merging this idea of the personal and the Skype for Business into one, and they're working on a few things. We do want to also obviously integrate Skype a little bit tighter. It's just there's basically Yammer's the newer product into the suite, so we have to start off with some of the foundational work before we get to the maybe more sexy and sometimes more impactful work. So yes, there's a plan.
I think that it's kind of related to the idea of document storage. And our vision is to obviously have unified document storage, unified presence, unified real-time communications. It doesn't make sense to have two different systems. But it really depends on that foundational identity work that we're making progress on. So it's definitely where we're headed, but we're not there yet.
Getting back to my group question on Delve groups, there's a microphone over here too. Delve groups and your groups and then Skype groups. Are you guys planning to make that so you don't have to manage 5 different groups across 5 different products? I mean, users get very confused and the learning curve is hard and a lot of support questions.
Yeah, I agree. So that was part of the further out. There's an Office 365 group service that basically powers all of these. We are going to hook it into that. We have a lot of so we've been in this group model for about 3 to 4 years now, so we have kind of a lot of existing stuff in that world. So we have to figure out exactly how to integrate. But yes, we've all agreed that that's a plan, and we're working towards it.
Further out months, next year, just so I get a rough idea?
Because we're not actively working on it right now, except at the high level, it wouldn't be in the next months. I'm hoping in the next year.
Okay, thank you.
Given that 365 Groups has so much rich functionality, though, what we're seeing is a lot of groups that we talk to saying, well, wait, I mean, this group's functionality is amazing. It has a calendar. Its documents are stored in SharePoint rather than the wacky place that it's stored on Yammer. We have granular security controls. All of that is leading a lot of our customers to say, well, if one of the big benefits of Yammer is a threaded conversation view, well, I can get that kind of an Office 365 group, so I'll just use that. And okay, great that I have external messaging, but a 365 group has email. And so I think there's this tension between those of us who, rightfully so, say, hey, we're seeing a lot of resonance with this 365 groups concept. And if Yammer isn't part of that train, people are just going to jump on the 365 groups and completely not go the other direction.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the direction we want to go in. And if Office 365 Groups, with its sort of Outlook conversations and the mail and the document storage, is what meets end users' needs, we absolutely encourage them to try it and adopt that. And when Yammer becomes part of it, they can join in on Yammer as well. So we definitely see 2 sort of ways of working. Actually more than 2, but 2 main ways of working. Those who prefer to model in Yammer today, even though it doesn't have that connectedness to calendaring yet or to SharePoint quite yet. And there's other people who are perfectly happy in email and SharePoint. And for them, Office 365 Groups gives them what they need. So unfortunately today, they do have to choose. There is an email interop that lets you work across the Yammer teams and your Office 365 Groups in Outlook. But when we are hooked up, hopefully that choice won't be quite as stark. So.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. I think there's also different assumptions around groups between the different products. So I think if you want to use something that's open and self-organizing and you want to discover things across your groups and not just to one group, Yammer would probably be the best place for you. If you're really in email and you want to have a little bit of groups on the side, I think you should use Outlook right now. And then obviously we are integrating, mentioned it a few times, we do want to go in this direction. I think all the pain points that you said and the audience agrees with you are things that we've seen.
So my question goes into the same direction. So we last year introduced Office 365 for our whole community, but did not push the social part that much because we were told that SharePoint social is dead and Yammer is the future. Mm-hmm. And now I was just, the session before I was in the Office 365 group overview where I heard similar stuff as I've heard now. So to make quickly or to make teams very easily to create their groups and have their conversations and all that stuff. So the same thing. They also told us that they will produce a mobile app that will come for office groups. So the only difference that I've heard now is the conversations on file. And what I would like to hear now is what can you suggest that I should tell our users, our managers, what should we do? Should we go with Yammer or Office 365 group for social?
Well, first, Yammer is a part of Office 365, so it wouldn't be that starking of a choice. You're kind of maybe asking the wrong person. I would definitely tell you to go to Yammer. Yeah. I think the adoption of it internally, it's hard for me to say anything else. It's just a tool that's built really around adoption, and it's built around making the best experience for the users and the network and the testing methodology. The idea of that everything is self-organizing and transparent and open, that's a little different than Office groups right now. So I think if you want to get the best usage and traction, my opinion would be use Yammer.
Yeah, but
I'm sure if you asked that in the other session, though, they probably said something else.
What is the strategy in the future from Microsoft? So it sounds for me that they are building with Office 365 a product that has the same capabilities as Yammer. And both is coming from Microsoft.
Yeah, I think there's some capabilities when you think about it that become a little bit of table stakes. So when you think of the history of real-time, it used to be that only chat was real-time. Mobile was really the thing that changed that. Suddenly everything has the expectation of real-time. If it's chat or if it's email or if it's anything, you really expect, or text messages, you expect everything to be instantaneous. I think some of these things around groups are like that. You see success somewhere and you adopt it. The question is that idea of groups at the core of what you're trying to accomplish. And I think for that, Yammer is really built around groups and from the ground up on that idea with discovery across. And if you really want to focus in on chat, then you should use Skype, and then groups will be more of a secondary feature there. Same with email. You would use Outlook, and groups would be a secondary feature there. So it's really, I think it's a little bit of what you're trying to accomplish. There is some confusion there, I agree.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And it'll be resolved when we're part of the groups.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, providing connected experience by hooking Yammer and Skype and OneDrive and Outlook and all our other services in Office 365 into this intelligence fabric. And that fabric is both identity service called Office 365 Groups, as well as Office Graph, which is the machine learning algorithm. So we're in an in-between stage right now, it's true, but once we are plugged in, it'll become a lot more seamless, and people can work in the tool of their choice, but still be able to share across and discover things across apps. So we've got 3 minutes left. Let me just get through the next couple slides, and we'll stick around for questions one-on-one if you have them. Great. So like I said, we've got a ton more sessions and content ready for you. We mentioned the developer session that Gaudi is running. There's also one about extensibility. If you're interested on building on top of Yammer APIs, we've got customer success panels. And tomorrow, Jay and Lindsay will actually be doing a live scenario-based demo session all around team collaboration, so you can see how teams use Yammer in their day-to-day workflow. So there's a lot of good stuff. Encourage you to check it out. And of course, all of these will be available as recordings. Also would encourage you to come by the booth and also join the Ignite network, as I said. And actually, for those of you who aren't already a part of the Office 365 network, that's where we are continuously basically making product announcements, answering questions. It's a long-standing community that was introduced about a year ago, and that's where we go ahead and kind of communicate out with our customers. So next steps, sign up for Office 365 if you haven't already, and use some of these new features that Gaudi talked about. Groups as a first-class destination, integration with Delve, integration with identity, our new mobile app, our improved algorithm feed to move your teams forward. And thank you so much for coming to our session.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We really want to hear more from you. So I know we're out of time, but please come by and talk to us about how you use the products and any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you.